and business development for Skills Consulting Group. And over the course of her career, she has led strategic initiatives that span New Zealand, Australia, the UK, and Europe, and worked with global brands, including Sanitarium, World Vision, and Energizer Chic, to grow brand presence and extend market reach. She's also managed multi-million-dollar budgets, coached and mentored cross-functional project teams, initiated transformational change, and instilled environments that are agile, flexible, and adaptable. In terms of leading teams through tough times, Helen says that one of her biggest lessons from lockdown is that sometimes leaders just need to drop the mask and show their human side to lead the team from there. She's a forward-thinking senior leader, and today she'll be sharing her leadership journey, warts and all, I believe, about driving strategic initiatives and delivering commercial goals while keeping your team motivated to always achieve that little bit more. So that's enough from me. Don't forget, everyone, to place any questions for Helen in the Q&A box, and we'll have a 10-minute Q&A session with her at the end. So on that note, welcome, Helen.
Morena, Suze. That sounds amazing. Who's this person, right?
There you go.
I'm really excited to be here this morning. What a couple of days it's been. I've been quite inspired personally. Some wonderful takeouts. I think what's most important, if you've been on the journey of the IMNZ Summit and listening to the speakers like I've been, is the consistency of messages around what it takes to be a great leader, but also what it takes to bring out the best in your team. You can have real confidence, I guess, in what you're hearing. But without further ado, let me get on. I actually have a bit of a presentation, so you don't have to look at my face the whole time. Righty-o. So I'm doing a bit of back to the past or back to the future, but looking to the past sometimes helps you navigate where you're going. And I've learned a few tips and tricks along the way that I'd like to share with you. Certainly 2020 became one of those words that we're just so looking to get over. Sometimes I don't think 2021 has actually started. It feels like a bit of a rolling train of 2020. But actually, let's have a look at what's been in the news. It was a bit of a sad day on Friday. If you were reading stuff pretty close to home for me, according to Stuff, the last DVD rental store in Christchurch closed its doors on Friday, marking a bit of an end of an era. United Video in Brighton will close after nearly 20 years, serving the community with cheap entertainment, weekend treats, and the perfect night in, it reported. Owner Darren Scott said the closure was due to a slowdown of mainstream movie releases in response to the COVID pandemic, along with people going online, renting and streaming. He wanted to keep his store open as a service to the New Brighton community, but it was no longer financially viable. So, I mean, do we have to conclude the world has changed so much that people are too busy to watch movies now? Well, of course, no way. In the US, they report, or Netflix reports, that its subscribers now stream over 3 hours on average a day of movies. But it does speak to the point that industries are rapidly changing, moving, collapsing. Between the start of COVID and now, I believe a quarter of all businesses around the world have closed. We've seen distilleries produce hand sanitizer, and in New Zealand, Countdown opened their very own online supermarket. So the speed of change now is actually quite extraordinary. So there's a bit of a big picture narrative going on here for leaders, which is really important. We've heard it through the last couple of days, but I'll wrap a few numbers around it. And we've just heard Susie talk a lot about burnout, but 76% of employees experience burnout, according to the World Health Organization, who's called burnout a work-based syndrome caused by chronic stress. We then have a global study finding that mental health amongst 42% of people participating in that study had declined since COVID began. And by 2030, depression is the #1 health problem. Depression, anxiety, loneliness, it's all a symptom of overwork and our always-on culture, exactly what Susie was just talking about. And we know this has a flow-on effect. It has a flow-on effect for individuals. It has a flow-on effect for the workplace. You know, it leads to absenteeism, decreased productivity and performance. This is the big picture that we've heard about. It is pretty alarming. We need to be aware of it. Over the last 12 months or so at Skills Consulting Group, we've been doing a lot of work to understand workplace wellbeing, the trends that you've heard have been changing that are more important. Earlier this morning, we heard Carmen talk about compassion being the topic that leaders are now looking out for and needing to display. We spoke to over 1,500 New Zealanders. We really wanted to understand what regular Kiwis think and feel about their wellbeing. Also from the perspective of employers as well as the Kiwi worker. What we've found is that 85% of employees expect their employers to do more for their wellbeing now than ever before. However, there's a catch. There's a 22% gap between what organisations think their employees need and what they actually get and what they actually need. The flow-on effect is that employee satisfaction, how happy am I at work, is 11% higher for people who believe their workplace embraces a wellbeing culture. So how does as leaders, whether you lead people, direct reports, you lead or motivate people around you, how do you operate? What's your modus operandi when such a sort of a seismic shift is happening, not only in those organizational structures, but what people need in the workplace? So don't be alarmed, this is not going to be a 20-minute talk on COVID and a big COVID lecture, but there are 3 certainties in life, and change is the biggest one. It is constant, and it's where leadership gets pretty tough. So what have I learned over this time, over the last 12 months, but also over my career in leading people? I'm going to take you through 3 big themes that I've learned. That shortcuts aren't short, very much like Gilbert was sharing around silver bullets aren't silver bullets, that people really do need people, and how to be human, how to use those words and make some practical sense out of being human. First of all, I guess you've all heard of life hacks, right? When we talk about shortcuts, we can talk about hacks. And life hacks are about tips and tricks to do life better, do life easier. If you Google 100 incredible life hacks, not now you're listening to me, but later, there are so many ways to make life easier and a lot of ways to use a loo roll. The dustpan example here is just inspired. You know, how many times have you tried to jam that bucket under the kitchen or laundry tap? But, you know, and sometimes life hacks aren't actually about doing something new. It might be about just changing the order with which you do stuff to make life easier. You know, the good old advice, put the attachment on the email first. How many times do you forget to send it without an attachment? If you do your laundry before your other chores, technically you're doing 2 things at once. You know, get the ingredients out before you start cooking. Don't fill in the to line of the email until you've written the email. It avoids you sending it too soon or to the wrong person. I've had some cracking examples of doing that really badly. Eat before grocery shopping is the #1 tip of doing things in different orders. So I guess the big question is there shortcuts and hacks for leadership? And I've put a big fat no deal on this. Hacks are not a winning strategy for leading people. I've done my fair share of team building events, special lunches, but if there are some issues in the team or if there are challenges and changes in the team, this is nice, it won't solve them. And from a statistical point of view, our research shows that staff, employees perceive wellbeing tokens like fruit bowls, yoga, team walks as lovely but pretty spray gun and tokenistic. So really, what does it take to do the work around leadership? Because great teams require everyone to work. I'm going to take this in 3 levels. There's one at an individual level, at a team level, on organisation-wide level, in terms of doing the leadership gig. It sounds trite, but put your own mask on first as a leader. We also heard about that in terms of leading by example or exhibiting the behaviours you want to see. I put this challenge out to my team as to what do you look for in your leader? And one of the wonderful quotes I got back was this: you know what, Helen, sometimes it's important that not only your manager does the hard work and reflects hard work, but that person also reflects the other important things of being a really well employee, like taking leave, taking time out for their own mental health, taking their lunch breaks, logging off when they need to, really walk the walk, because it's not only hard work, it's not only doing the work, but prioritizing yourself as well is important. Because guys, if your leader doesn't do this, then you feel like you shouldn't do it either. At a team level, there's a few things here, and your team really needs you. Being a supportive manager, being a supportive leader absolutely makes the difference. In fact, we know that people leaders who are rated by their team as, this person understands me and my personal circumstance, actually help people feel like their job is worthwhile. And feeling like you have a worthwhile job absolutely delivers in spades. On the flip side, beware of your leadership shadow. And this is just what Susie spoke about. Your words and your attitudes bring up the team or send them flat. I think actually words matter the most. I was recently listening to or watching the Michelle Obama Becoming documentary, and she says it really well. The higher up you go, the higher you have to be. And when people go low with their comments, as a leader, you have to go high. There's a couple of other things I would throw in there as practical ways to really invest in your team. And one of them is to actually name it, to say it's okay when life just happens. Say it's okay for children to interrupt, or pets to interrupt or join meetings during lockdown. Say it's okay to move someone's schedule around. What else is happening in life? Like, I don't know, tradies, health, the schedule of online school. Think of you think your people are just okay, because of course everyone would know that's okay, but don't assume that. Actually say that having life, being life happens is okay. Be present. I'm actually a bit of a shocker at this, but actively listening to people's concerns and worries and not getting distracted by emails, pop-ups, texts, phone calls while someone's doing that is really important. It's feedback that I've been given, and it's important that I improve in that in myself. And lastly, regular check-ins. As we roll through this sort of working from home, working from office, change up scenario, you can't over-communicate. Regular check-ins are important and need to be intentional. And as lockdown started, we set up a thing in our team around every 9 o'clock in the morning. We had a quick 30-minute catch up just to touch base. I mean, most of that conversation was definitely social. Work barely made up of 20%. At that time, we set up a instant messaging channel for the whole team around a fun channel and around a work channel if we needed to do work-related conversations. The fun channel has just been such an awesome initiative. It's still rolling now, 18 months down the track. It can be used for some crazy things. Can I suggest not to use it for a debate about Meghan and Harry? It's pretty wild, but a lot of fun. Keep it going. From a people leader perspective, it helps keep track of where everyone's at, their mental health, how they're coping. Is a nice little barometer. That's my trick there. Zooming out to a whole of sort of organization level. Colleen Ryan from TRA recently reminded me of this quote from Stephen Covey. Always treat your employees exactly the way you want them to treat your best customers. Has it really taken us 39 years since this book was written to help this notion come to the fore and grow into a mindset that you treat your employees well first? It seems obvious. We're not always good at it. We often follow the numbers, the performance, the shareholder needs. But when people feel genuinely cared for, it shouldn't be a surprise that they feel more motivated at work and more effective. And as a leader, even anywhere in the organization, you are in a position of influence on workplace culture. And it's really important to find your influence. But hold that, I'm actually going to come back a wee bit more to that later. So that's first of all, shortcuts aren't short. The second big theme is around how people need people. In July 2020, cast your mind back, we had only been into COVID, 3-4 months. Most news reports gave coverage to CEOs making the early call that everything had changed and remote working is here to stay. The Twitter CEO at the time announced that employees can work home forever. Fujitsu announced that remote working is the primary pattern for work now on. And at the same time, Fujitsu announced, at least in Japan, it was selling half of its office space. By October, so 3 months on from that, some CEOs were declaring that working from home is not sustainable at all. Barclays CEO had said that he expects everyone to come back to the office as soon as it was safe to do so. He says, being together is important for culture. So which view of the future is most accurate? Are we going to be a Fujitsu Twitter or a Barclays? I'm going to give you a couple of options here. So on the one hand, remote working has some really great benefits. People can be more productive. I recently spoke to a New Zealand-based tech company, had run the numbers on their team's performance and saw significant shifts in productivity with their workforce at home. There's no traffic. You can spend more time with family, sometimes in good ways, sometimes in crazy ways. It can be more cozy, work clothes up top, trackies and slippers down below. It can be more cost effective, particularly for an organization. And also, remote working brought out a sense of shared vulnerability and connectedness. You saw the crazy that was happening sometimes in people's lives at home. You certainly would have seen that if you had a video conference with my household. You hear stories of CEOs for the first time having intentional catch-ups with their whole organization like they'd never had before. And as I said earlier, I caught up with my whole team every day. And even at the workplace, if I come to the office, I wouldn't do that. So there are some really good points there. On the other hand, we have to acknowledge some of the things that get lost with working from home. And one of the first things is relationships. Relationships are so much easier to develop in person. I was reading a great blog actually from Andrew O'Keefe. He's written a book on hardwired humans, how great leadership is built out of human instincts. I would read that book if I was, a recommendation, absolutely. But he was saying, we form relationships. We are hardwired to form relationships by bonding through chit chat, those informal conversations. The Netflix CEO, Reed Hastings, says, I don't see any positives about remote working, and not being able to get together in person is a pure negative. Social interaction. Just ask any parent of school kids about the weeks or months of lockdown, and I will suspect 1 out of 1 will say that learning is better in person in the classroom. And for many reasons, I testify to that. But adults are the same. A lot of our learning is from random or casual conversations, hearing stories, learning from experienced colleagues. And lastly, creativity. Most of the work done in lockdown is often, transactional work or operational work. Things can keep going and they can keep going well. I know I was completely surprised that we could lift our whole department from the office, home, wherever it is, and the work just happened. It was amazing. But what about the next wave of innovation? Where does that come from? Creativity and innovation is put on steroids when people collaborate well and have spontaneous interactions, that proverbial water cooler. So where's the answer? And it's probably somewhere in the middle is about right. As we've come out of COVID, certainly in New Zealand, we have workplaces that have encouraged their staff to come back to the offices. Other workplaces are not so keen on that, might be a bit reluctant, are happy to have their workforce at home. There's a bit of a transition, a swing from office work to home work, and mostly a bit of both is about right. The overriding question for you as a people leader is how you keep your people engaged and productive wherever you are. how you check in on them, how you know where they're at. And you just might have to try a few things. I would say it's not one way or the other. I guess it's about being informed and being conscious of the positives and negatives on those different working environments. Lastly, being human. I'm not going to unwrap the complexity, contradictions, and mystery of human life, or otherwise channel David Attenborough. But I would have to say, from the reading that I've been doing, leaders, managers account for at least 70% of engagement with people, with employees, with staff. So whether they lead with humanness, with human-centeredness, makes a big difference. I was reading a Human Capital Leadership Institute report written from March 2020, saying it's not just about the employees, but this also makes a difference to business as well. What's involved with being human? We hear that it can be a bit of a cliche, but what's involved? And I can only tell you my personal experience of what's involved with being human. The first thing for me is absolutely getting over yourself, getting over myself, and putting other people first, putting your people first, giving them what they need to achieve more. The role of a leader, your whole role is to bring out the best in your people, not just do your own work super well. And your people are units of labor to get stuff done. You know, think of that as you make plans to start your day, or as you evaluate the end of a day. How have you brought out the best in your people? I love this quote from Simon Sinek. The true value of a leader is not measured by the work they do. It is measured by the work they inspire others to do. It pays back, you know, it lifts the whole tide if you invest in your people first. The other one is genuinely care. I'd like to add meat on those bones. Again, that can sound really, words are cheap, but genuinely care. A Gallup study recently revealed that if a supervisor or someone at work cared about them, people were more likely to stay, have more engaged customers, be more productive. And this is not about people pleasing. It's not about always saying yes, being a giant softie, having endless D&Ms on the couch, talking about feelings. It is about meeting people where they're at. It is about responding with empathy to the individual challenges people face and helping them take action, wrapping around them in a plan. Maybe, you know, maybe there's something you can help them do. Maybe there's a, you can use a work EAP. Maybe, you know, you can get a great coach, as Susie's talking about. It's about walking alongside them. You're not the happy police, but it's about meeting them where they're at and their individual challenges. The lines between work life and home life are so blurred now. The attitude of keep your personal issues at home must be an attitude of the past. The research we have done in New Zealand has identified genuine care as having such a strong impact on how the workplace is one of a wellbeing culture. I am going to put a few numbers more about this. I'll have to, I know Ezekiel, who presented earlier, who said, hey, I'm not going to do the workplace data thing. I'm going to do the data thing, and I'll get back to him later. Total workplace satisfaction is a really good indicator of how the workplace is going, and you've all done those old engagement surveys, but next level from that. People at work are more satisfied and happier to be at work when their culture is one of a well-being culture. What this leads to is higher motivation, higher effectiveness when your people are happier at work. Significantly different levels of motivation and effectiveness. And sort of what was a clincher for me when I was reading through our research was the role in a leader at work and how that influences how a person not only is at work, but their life. So my overall satisfaction in life is significantly higher if I'm satisfied at work. Guys, we're here as people leaders to be aware and connect with our people. They are whole people. They're not a work person and a home person. They are a human. And we're here to connect with them on an individual basis for work and acknowledging the impact it has on home. The last thing I'd have to say, bring it all down to the basics, is find what keeps you grounded as a leader, where you can just be you, where you're not the manager, the decision maker, the stakeholder influencer, the expert. When life is going crazy, when you're trying to figure out a few dynamics, work is going gangbusters or incredibly tough, you need to stay in touch with reality and what's most important. For me, it's absolutely my kids, whether it's a running commentary on my body parts as I have a shower, or a sage advice from a 5-year-old like, "Mum, let it go," or "That's not particularly acceptable, Mum." It leads me back to the description, the headline for the talk I was giving now, of watching my kids jump in their undies in the tramp in the rain. If I cast my mind back to lockdown, I was working from the dining room table, and one day I had first up the CEO calls. I was keen to find out about the board meeting that just happened and the implications. I had butterflies, virtual butterflies all over my face. I couldn't figure out how to get them off. I felt like a right roll. Muppet. Second step, an Australian consultant calls on Zoom. I am Godzilla meeting a zombie. My son has been on a Scouts call the night before on Zoom, set the filter. I haven't figured out how to change that quickly. Last thing that happens, another really important video conference later in the day, very important, have to be important, very serious. My daughter decides to sing her maths homework out loud. Everyone can hear, I'm doing maths. So, do you know what? It started to rain heavily. The kids were stuck inside and they said, "Can we go outside and jump on the tramp in our undies?" And I was like, wow. Apart from learning don't let kids play with your laptop, just watching them and their unadulterated realness and just fun and vulnerability of jumping in the tramp on the undies, it's a reality check. Stay grounded, stay you. Take your work seriously, but don't take it all too seriously. For you, it might be community work, friends, family, church, whatever. Find what keeps you grounded. Wrapping it all up, as you go through your own personal journey of leadership, through constant and sometimes a pretty jolting change, consider this. Those shortcuts aren't short. By all means, shout the sausage roll lunch, have a team day, have fun, but also play to the leadership trifecta. For you, lead by example, walk the walk. Support your team, influence your organization. People need people. We are hardwired to be connected, to have relationships. So find what will work for you and your team as you navigate the rise in remote working. And honestly, my advice is try a few things. And lastly, be human. Genuinely care for your people. Focus on them as individuals, definitely not units of labor. Your role is to be human-centered, to bring out the best in them. I've got a great quote from a people leader within my team. Meet your people where they are at and then take them further. So I started with the news that a DVD chain store had closed down. All DVD chain stores had closed down in Christchurch. This is a pretty good example of relentless change from a person who was glued to the box as TV3 launched and had family time watching MacGyver on VHS tapes. And Ezekiel talked about the boombox. I was there. As people leaders, now and in the future, how are you keeping pace? Are you ready to meet the moment? Thanks, guys.
Fantastic, Helen. And I didn't know about United Video closing. So, yeah, I'm of that era too. I'm a bit sad to hear that. Oh, dear. Yeah, we've changed, haven't we? So lots of questions coming in as you were speaking. First one, let's go to that, is, are there deal breakers when it comes to leading by example?
Yeah, look, absolutely. There's lots of ways to lead by example and to exhibit the behavior you want to see. I guess I'll cast my memory back to my OE many, many moons ago, floating around the UK. And one of the main catchphrases you'd hear, obviously every day, was mind the gap. And I would have to say a deal breaker for me is acknowledging the gap between your words and your actions, because the gap, the size of that gap, that's where integrity lives. So you want to make that gap as small as possible, that what you say and what you do. And we've heard this, we've grown up with this type of understanding, but it's the gap that's really important. When you lead by example, don't have a gap between what you say and what you do. And that's about walking the walk. Another really couple of practical things I would say that are personal to me. I love to have my team shine. If they do something awesome, I want the credit on them. That's important to me. It's important to them. It's important to be visible in a company and be known for what you've done. So shine the light on people who do things well, make it known, and go to that effort. And lastly, be vulnerable. That's about being human, because you're not perfect. Let your people know that you make dumb mistakes and you don't know all the answers. And that leads to a level of comfort throughout the team. It makes it a safe space for people to ask questions knowing that their leader doesn't know it either, and that you're on a journey together.
So there is a question here about what 3 simple things managers can do to better support the wellness of their teams. And obviously that's one of them, the safe place to say what they're thinking. What else would you say are simple things to support them in the wellness?
Yeah, so that's right. That safe space is most important, not only for them to know that you're a real human being, but also you need to foster an environment where people are very comfortable to challenge, very comfortable to ask questions, very comfortable to know, oh, if I say something dumb, it's actually okay. You know, you're not going to get creativity and innovation if no one wants to say anything new or ask a question. Making it safe for people to be themselves, bring their whole self to work, is key to an environment where people feel cared for, because they know I'm actually okay to be who I am. I don't have to be someone else when I come to work, put on another face. So I probably couldn't underweight what it means to create a safe space with your team. The other thing would really be to acknowledge, and we've heard this a lot, around understanding people at an individual level, meeting them where they're at, genuinely caring for them. Again, this is not about being the happy police. We all must be, firing on all cylinders. And I must now become a counsellor. Genuinely caring is just walking alongside people and going, hey, how can I help you do something? Can we put something in place? Where are you at? Hey, do you need something today? Checking in, because do you know what? People aren't good at telling you how they're going, because they might feel a bit vulnerable or ashamed. So be proactive, check in. How are you? That's one of the most underrated questions. Are you okay today? Don't think it's trivial. Actually ask it.
Absolutely, most agreed. Now, question 2 about the research on wellness that you've been talking about. Will you be making that available to attendees?
Absolutely. We're actually just packaging that up at the moment. But please put your name, can't think of how to do it, attendees, or put your name in the chat, or visit the Skills Consulting Group booth and say you'd like a copy of that research, and we'll absolutely fire it out to you. It's great to have research that is totally Kiwi-centric, because we know it's reflective of where we're at. We're not trying to become a mini America or a mini Australia. It's us and where we're at.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Helen. We actually have run out of time, or we've gone just over, so I do have to jump in there and say that's a wrap. Thank you to you, Helen, and also to all of the speakers who've made our event possible, and for the attendees, of course, you out there, for joining us across both days of the IMNZ Summit 2021. We hope you enjoyed your time with us and noted a few key things to take into your own leadership roles.